Welcome to the party. The Vikings have traded for a quarterback. Arif gets burned on Twitter by a Vikings starter. And what's the most difficult position to pinpoint on the Vikings 53-man roster? It's the Minnesota Football Party, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Endless Vikings talk with local experts. Let's meet those local experts today. We've got the two Lukes, Luke Inman of Superior Sports Talk and Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings coming at you daily. We've also got Arif Hasan of theathletic.com covering the Vikings there. Gentlemen, happy Monday. Arif, do you have an ice pack on you after the Chandon Sullivan burn on Twitter? Are you wrapped up in ice and gauze? How are you doing? How are you feeling?
I mean, honestly, the burn wasn't that, like, if we're being honest, you just disagreed with me. That's all it was.
There it is. If you're watching on YouTube, Chandon Sullivan gets after Arif's critique, and he was sitting in the weeds for 8 days with this, Arif. You critiqued the Raiders' performance, and he comes at you 8 days later. You thought you were in the clear, but Chandon Sullivan is watching at all times.
Well, no, hold on. Who comes out of this looking worse, though, right? Like, name searching 8 days after a game? That's beta behavior.
Name searching constantly.
Yeah. Like, also, like, here's the thing. He's just like, what if I was just complimenting all 10 other starters more? Right? Because I was just saying he's the biggest issue on the defense, but all 10 other starters, they're a really high level.
Were you?
Does he have like something to say about Patrick Peterson? I'd love to hear it.
It's an 85 Bears-like defense, and Chandon Sullivan is 11th of 11, but he's still really, really good.
Yeah, he's the Leslie Frazier.
Leslie Frazier, yes, thank you, yes.
We got a big show today, but we'll jump right into the Minnesota Vikings making a trade for a quarterback. His name is Nick Mullens. He hails from the Las Vegas Raiders. The price they pay, a 2024 seventh-round pick. So basically nothing. The Vikings get Nick Mullens to presumably be their backup. We start with Luke Inman. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a good happy medium between the old wily vet Mannion, capped out, you don't trust him to go win a ball game, and that young developmental quarterback, Kellen Mond, who you also don't trust to go out and win a ball game either. Now, you've got a guy who's got 4 years under his belt in the league. This will be his fifth year. More importantly, 17 starts, 16 of them under that Shanahan offense. So I think that will translate and transition smoothly over to the KOC offense better compared to other few options they would have had to make a move on in free agency or a different trade. And I think most importantly, risk reward cost you just a seventh round pick in 2 years. And I think just $1.4 million against the cap. So we all question whether the number 2 quarterback was on the roster. It turns out it wasn't, assuming Mullens does come in over the next month and can get caught up to speed inside this offense and leapfrog Mond and Mannion, which obviously isn't saying much.
It's a smart move. I mean, if you take a look at Mullens' production in a similar system, obviously his Shanahan system is not identical to the McVay system, but they have very similar roots and probably have some pretty similar terminology. You take a look at his production there, and it's just substantially better than anything Mannion's been able to put together. And I think by proxy, that would tell us it's probably better than something Mond can do because Mond has yet to beat out Mannion. The fact that race is close probably tells us that if we compare Mullens to Mannion, you're in a much better spot. I think Mullens' career passer rating is something like 87. Mannion's is like 66. You compare their adjusted net yards per attempt, it's like 6.5 to 3.7. Those are, middle of the bottom numbers for a quarterback for Nick Mullens, and those are out of the league numbers, which I guess that's technically from a starter's perspective what Sean Mannion is, but they're not comparable to NFL starters. They are liabilities. They're enormous problems, statistically speaking, compared to other quarterbacks around the league. And so Mullens is definitely that type of quarterback where if you're up 2 scores at halftime and he has to come in and play out the rest of the game, you've got a pretty reasonable shot at winning the game, right? Whereas with Mannion, you're going to lose more points than you gain having him out there on the field. You're going to give up field position. You're going to throw picks. You're going to have bad sacks. I mean, I think with Mullens, you just have a much more capable, stable quarterback that, and I guess this is important for Cousins, doesn't really threaten Cousins.
Yeah, I wonder how Cousins feels about this because he has like pounded the table for Sean Mannion for like 4 years now. But the bottom line of it is neither Mond nor Mannion deserve to be on a 53-man roster right now, and I think Nick Mullens does. And this was a panic button I think we knew that they needed to hit. And I mean, trading a 2024 conditional 7th is not panicking. That's a pretty the price is right. Conditional on Nick Mullens being active for one game.
Yeah,
Which
we've
is
seen
that if
picks
that's
they
where
give
the
up
bar
when they
is.
panic. Yeah, we know what that looks like.
Yeah, true. But like it's I think it's great. It's a good move. It's really cheap, and they got better at a position that they needed to be better at. And I think the question now is Kellen Mond going to be able to be a QB3? Like, is he worth a roster spot on the promise of developing him more? That becomes the question, and that question is uncomfortably hard.
Great point, Luke. I think that is a huge puzzler on cut day. I picture Kirk Cousins the day he says goodbye to Sean Mannion, like Michael Scott leaning over the computer, refreshing on Goodbye My Lover by James Blunt over and over, just the 30-second sample over and over again. Here's what I've got
It's
on
just
Mullens.
the sample, though. He didn't buy the whole song. It's just the sample.
Yeah, just a taste. Just a taste. It's conceivable that KOC, picked Shanahan's brain about Mullens while they were here, and that precipitated this trade. If you look at the PFF ranks, Mullens is bad. I mean, you could convince yourself that this is a disastrous quarterback who, as Arif said, is more of a liability. That being said, he has 6 NFL football games against NFL football players where he had a 75 grade or better. He has 5 NFL football games against NFL football players where he had a passer rating of 100 or above. So somewhere in there of kind of like a struggling 17-game stretch as a starter, he's going to have some good moments. And that's probably more than we can say we've ever seen from Mannion in very select duty, or Mond, who struggles against 2s and 3s. So I think this is the best you're going to do when you try to make a move for a quarterback after the market has already, been established, and you try to trade for someone. Like, for that price, yeah, it's great. It's great to get someone in who can maybe 1 in 3 times give you a 100 quarterback rating. That's a good thing. But, man, I can't stop thinking about Luke Braun's point. What do you do on cut day with Mond? And I think I would lean toward hanging on to him for at least this year. What do you guys think?
Who's better in 2024, Kellen Mond or Nick Mullens? 2 years from now. I'm going with Mullens. I'm sorry. Kellen Mond just doesn't look like he's going to make it.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think that Mullens is probably better, but I think I generally would like to give quarterbacks a third year, even if they don't show very much in the way of progression. Although I guess I would say Mond's progression is pretty clear and obvious, just not in a way that currently translates into usable quarterback play. So I would say you keep him on the roster, but certainly I think that the likelihood is that Mullens is better than Mond in 2024. I would just say the reverse case, the instance where Mond is better than Mullens in 2024 is really valuable, and it's worth preserving a roster spot for that, however small eventuality.
Yeah, ditto Arif there. I think you got to give him one more year. And I think it's just such an important position. If somehow he does make some sort of miraculous leap next year, it was worth keeping him on that extra roster spot. But you're right. Luke Braun, you're right. 2 years from now, I'm putting my money on Nick Mullens still being better than Kellen Mond for sure. But I think, again, risk reward, I think it's worth keeping him on that roster spot.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody's claiming him. If you cut him, I think you could do this on the practice squad if you wanted to. Because after what he's put out in the preseason, nobody's going, that guy's on my 53.
I could say
I told Arif after Saturday's press conference with KOC, he was asked about the quarterback spot, and he did the most delicate tiptoe job around that question. He knew this was in the works, and he went to great filibustering lengths to talk around that question. He knows that it's been a problem. And that leads us to Saturday's game. Honestly, I don't have a lot to say about the aesthetic of that game. I think there are some interesting players to talk about, but I want you guys to try to conjure a hot take somehow out of that game. 17-7, 49ers win a dullard of a preseason game where 27 players on both sides didn't play. So, Arif, how hot can you turn up the heat on a take of a preseason game that nobody cared about?
I mean, I can create a pretty hot take. I can say the Vikings are in contention of the best defensive line in the NFL, right? Like all
T.Y.
we
McGill.
need, right? I mean, you just need T.Y. McGill. Jonathan Bullard had a really great game for his, what was it, 9 snaps? I know Luke probably reviewed that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say that when you've got, McGill and Bullard as your backups, guys that are playing at, I would argue, a starter level, and then you've got what we've seen from Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson. I mean, it's going to be hard to run on that front. And you've got Daniil Hunter and za'darius Smith, and za'darius Smith looked like a monster against the 49ers in joint practices, maybe not the preseason. I think that you've got the potential to have the best defensive line in the NFL. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, T.Y. McGill
do one that is a
becoming
combination.
a cult hero pretty fast here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Luke
Well,
Braun.
like you said on the postcast, Sam, he's the next Tom Johnson.
It's happening.
A thunder bucket of his own.
Yeah.
Is that what
I can
TY
combine
stands for?
two really hot takes into one, and they cancel each other out. And I can say that Alexander Mattison was in danger of losing his job and no longer is. I thought he had a really nice game, and I think he needed one.
Mm-hmm.
He was good in pass protection. He made the right reads. Like that, he
I
didn't
honestly,
do
I don't
that
think he was
against the
ever at
Raiders.
risk. I don't think he was ever.
Well, that's why that's the other hot take.
And you're willing
I've been
to
saying that hot take
solidify.
since like May.
I know it's a hot take, but you're willing to solidify his spot after how many series? 2?
What I wanted to see was him pick up a blitz right, because I saw him like mess that up like enough to be concerned and not have like a crazy vision issue. And I actually thought he had like a bunch of really actually good reps. The one Kellen Mond rep where he bails out of the pocket and finds, I think it was BC Johnson on the run. That does not happen if not for a really, really quality blitz pickup on a stunt from Madison. That's the kind of stuff I wanted to see from him. But that's why it's 2 hot takes, both that he needed it and that he did it.
Wangu correctly picking up a blitz and still allowing the quarterback hit. Like at some point, Madison's inability or relative inability to be consistent about his blitz assignments, to not always get his assignment right, is less than another running back's ability to always get the assignment right and that not mattering because they just get bowled over, right? So there's that. I mean, Madison, when he picks up his blitz, is actually a pretty good pass protector. It's just going all the way back to Boise State. This has always been a problem for him, is that making those assignments correct. And like Luke said, actually over the past 2 games, not just this game, Madison's been pretty good about blitz pickup.
Not a
He's
good
much
week
better
for Wongwu, with the drops against San Francisco and then the missed blitz pickup, as you referred to. Luke Inman, I've got a hot take. I want you to react to it. I don't think the Vikings have a wide receiver worthy of the 6th wide receiver spot on the roster right now. Your thoughts?
Interesting. Well, my hot take, not as spicy as Arif's. It was going to be that BC is the clear-cut number 4 on this team right now heading into the season. You might see ISM in certain packages and looks, but I think more times than not, at least out of the gate, these first 2-3 weeks, I think you're going to see BC up first for snaps. KJ, JJ, Thielen needs a breather, banged up for a few plays. I think it's BC Johnson that's going to come up first and foremost, just from what we've seen these first 2 preseason games collectively and what we've seen from camp thus far too. So I think BC's not only making the team, obviously you could put that to bed long ago, but he'll be more of a contributor in the passing game. Really, I think you're right. The biggest battle at wide receiver now remains Tristan Jackson, Myron Mitchell, Jalen Naylor. And Naylor, by the way, I think he's the long shot of the 3 at this point. I'd give the edge to Jackson, but is he worth a wide receiver 6 spot at this point? How likely is it that you can sneak him on the practice squad? I think that's what you end up risk reward, try to gamble on. Big question, obviously, it's going to get answered, next Tuesday, I think, when they got to trim down to 53. So I think he is worth a number 6 spot, to be honest. In this offense, knowing how much you're going to spread him out, I think he is.
And you were the one who opened my eyes, Luke, to the fact that Jackson was an O'Connell McVay guy, 2 years ago? Is that accurate?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I mean, he got a little bit of love in the post game from KOC, in the sense that KOC lumped him in with those that are battling along with Myron Mitchell. Didn't mention Albert Wilson. Might not be looking good for our boy Albert there. What do you guys think of this? If Andrew Booth Jr. is hurt, Caleb Evans is the first corner off the bench, because I thought he was physical on Saturday, and I don't know if he can cover. but he's not afraid to hit people, wrap people up. Luke Braun, your thoughts on that? I know we touched on it in the postcast.
A little bit. I haven't been able to go back and like rewatch him, but on the day I kept noticing that he was playing really far off and kind of getting exposed over it. I think he played a little scared, which that can happen, right? You just give a little more cushion than you think you need to give, and then things get caught in front of you. So I don't know. That's backup corner behavior. I think there could be a world where he comes in. At this moment, if it were up to me and I had to choose somebody that isn't Andrew Booth to be like the third guy off on the outside, I'm probably going with Chris Boyd.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think Boyd certainly has the reps and the experience to be kind of like a Nick Mullens. Like, he's going to have some good moments. He's also going to have some bad moments. The cornerback, the depth chart, Arif, is tricky to me at this point. I don't love the like far down depth that they have available. And if you lose Booth, I think it really gets exposed.
Yeah, I guess I'm not like overly concerned. I think that this is not the deepest cornerback group the Vikings have had. It's also not the shallowest that they've had over the past decade. I think that, you're somewhere in the middle in terms of what that depth is and what that brings you. I'm not overly concerned about a Caleb Evans, right? I think that, he had a good showing. I think that there were some moments where he kind of played a little bit too far off. The thing is, Luke says he plays scared, and I think the way that usually actualizes for quarterbacks is that they don't really get in there and get the tackle. He was fine doing that. It was his coverage that was a little bit, I don't know if hesitant's the right word, but he definitely didn't want to be
a line scared, maybe.
Yeah, you didn't want to get beat deep, I guess.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
But yeah. But I think for the most part, he has, I wouldn't say the fundamentals down, that's his primary concern, but he has, the basics as far as you want in a depth corner. Obviously, you go past Booth, which, the Booth injury is evidently not that serious. We'll probably get an update later today. But once you get past Booth, once you get past Evans, you're in a pretty big spot. I guess I like Harrison Hand enough that it doesn't really bother me that much. But my bigger concern is that nickel corner spot. Not just, the starter, but also the depth. What do you do if Shannon Sullivan's not able to go? Do you just, right? Okay, let's say Shannon Sullivan is quite good. Sure, fine. Maybe he's right. If he gets hurt, what happens, right? Do you roster Perry Nickerson in that circumstance? I don't know. That doesn't seem, wonderful to me. Do you move Harrison Hand inside? He's been floated as the shadow depth of nickel corner, but he hasn't really taken that many nickel snaps in this defense over camp, right? Do you move Patrick Peterson inside? I mean, that's a somewhat common move for older cornerbacks, and then you just promote one of your outside guys. But I don't know if short area quickness is where Patrick Peterson really has a lot of his athleticism left. So I don't know if that's necessarily the best move. So the concern for cornerback depth has less to do with overall the quality of the cornerbacks down the roster, which I think is fine, compared to most teams. Not the best, not the worst. It's that nickel spot that really bothers me, just in terms of, what happens if an injury occurs there.
Yeah, to that point, too, I want to throw this one out, just to try to alleviate your weaknesses as much and highlight your strengths. How much if they were to get into some trouble and maybe an outside guy goes down, is it a Caleb Evans or is it Chris Boyd? Maybe Shannon Sullivan goes down. Is it Harrison Hand? Is it Perry Nickerson? Do they start to lean into that three safety look, big nickel look, stuff like that a little bit more and try to highlight and accent more of their strengths and talent with Bynum, Harry, and obviously trying to get Lewis Seen, all three of those guys on the field as much as possible? Obviously, you're limited a little bit more in what you can do, but I think that was something that we talked about a lot in the offseason after they drafted Lewis Seen and knew that Bynum still had a chance to be on the field quite a bit. Do you think they lean into this three safety package look a little bit more if that cornerback depth does start to drop down and get concerning if you start to miss a guy or two?
I'm going to jump in here.
I think
yes,
Bynum might be the second best.
Yeah, that could be the case. I think it's not just that Bynum can play cornerback for you, although, we saw a little bit of that last year and it wasn't wonderful. We saw why they moved him to safety. But the Vikings have been very aggressive about putting safeties on the field in these sub packages. Not only did they show three safety looks throughout, training camp that put Lewis Seen on the field, that put, Cameron Bynum in interesting spots. They also put four safety looks out on the field right? The 2-minute defense against Trey Lance in the final joint practice ended up seeing 4 safeties on the field with Josh Metellus playing cornerback. Now, he was playing
Interesting.
outside cornerback in that scenario, but I've also seen him on the field in 3 and 4 safety sets as a nickel corner. And that's interesting to me because I remember his rookie year in training camp. I was really impressed with what he could do in man coverage and thought that his zone coverage was frankly kind of garbage, which is really interesting for a safety whose primary job is going to be that. So I actually think that that's something that they might continue to explore. Now, Metellus' like man coverage capability is probably better against tight ends, which actually he was one of the only ones that did all right in those drills against the 49ers than it is against receivers. But that's better than what we're probably going to get from Harrison Smith, where Harrison Smith has an enormous skill set. He's good at everything except man coverage.
Coming up, we're going to guess Kirk Cousins' stat line for 2022. We've also got our mystery guest of honor coming up here momentarily, but first, a word from betonline.net, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. The Vikings did not cover on Saturday, so many folks are devastated, I'm sure. They'll try again on Saturday against the Broncos. You can find the line at betonline.net, your top online resource for sports wagering information. Head there today on your laptop or your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. It's BetOnline. It's where the game starts. And folks, again, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota. Leave a 5-star review. Leave a comment. Wherever you get your podcasts, it's free and available. And the video is free as well, Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. We've got our guest of honor sitting and waiting. He works for the Vikings Entertainment Network as an on-air host. His name is Gabe Henderson. Gabe, welcome to the party, my man.
Thanks for having me on. Glad to be joined by you guys. It's been a interesting offseason thus far, but I'm happy to talk Vikings. This is going to be a really good year for this team. So I'm just hoping all the pieces of the puzzle come together before the season starts.
Gabe, we should probably get your Nick Mullens take out of the gate. Nick Mullens traded earlier today. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that was an interesting trade. I can see a lot of people saying that didn't come by surprise, especially after the last 2 performances by our backup quarterbacks. But I will look at that and say, this is an opportunity for Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion to have more competition going into preseason game number 3. Preseason game number 1 was really good for Kellen Mond. Sean Mannion didn't have any interceptions also. Then last week, it wasn't the best performance for Kellen Mond having 2 interceptions. So this is an opportunity. Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, they saw Nick Mullens last week or 2 weeks ago when he was playing for the Las Vegas Raiders. So this only adds more competition to that room, and ultimately, hopefully, it makes the team better.
Be interested to see if he plays on Saturday or if they just go Mond Mannion once again in that rotation.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that too. I'm sure I don't think you bring him on the roster on a Monday and he doesn't play on a Saturday night, especially in a preseason game. So I would assume that he'll play. I think his biggest thing is how quickly can he grasp this playbook. This playbook is very complex, very deep. A lot of players have already said that. So what is that learning curve for him, learning this on a 5-day notice? Of course, preseason is the playbook is very vanilla and very bland and a lot of the same plays, but how deep can we go in the playbook with Nick Mullens? How much does he know already? How much can he unlearn what he learned in Las Vegas this offseason, the past 3 or 4 months, and learn maybe 10 to 20 to 25 plays on this Minnesota Vikings team right now, and ultimately go out there and make some success this upcoming Saturday against the Denver Broncos? So, see, there's a lot to learn, a lot to know, and I'm sure his head is probably swimming right now also.
Luke Inman, what do you got for a man, Gabe?
Well, Gabe, I was just thinking about these wide receivers, and KJ Osborne, we know he just came out of nowhere last year in his second year. No one had him on 50 receptions, 800 yards, 7 TDs, so that was obviously great to see. Is there another second-year guy you think could have a similar leap in their sophomore year, somebody that were, kind of maybe flying under the radar a little bit, if you will, that could have maybe a similar kind of leap in production that we saw KJ take? I know there's a laundry list of guys. They drafted a lot of guys last year. Is there one guy in there that you're expecting some big things from?
I know this isn't the sexiest position, and a person that you're not going to see his name or number or anything in the stat sheet. I mean, you don't want to hear his name or number on the stat sheet, but I got to say Christian Darrisaw, left tackle for the Minnesota Vikings, has had a really phenomenal offseason. Last week, they had the joint practices. He was going one-on-one against Nick Bosa, who is arguably one of the best DNs in the game today. He was putting Nick Bosa on skates. I mean, there were some plays that Nick Bosa won some of those reps, rightfully so. But Christian Darrisaw, the work that he's put in this offseason is starting to pay off. There was a few videos this offseason on his Instagram of him being here at the TCO Performance Center, working out at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and just getting that work in that could put him over that edge for this upcoming season. And we're starting to see some of that work pay off. We saw Trent Williams make that comment this past week that he sees a lot of himself in this second year Christian Darrisaw. And I think this is only going to be another year that he continues to get better. I think that the better Christian Darrisaw is, the more comfortable Kirk Cousins is in this offense. And we all know when Kirk is comfortable, he's a top 10, top 5 quarterback when he is able to be himself.
Love it. Mm-hmm.
Gabe, I want to ask you about some of the hosting stuff that you've done over at VEN. And in particular, if you had to start a podcast, who would be your co-host? Who would be the most fun person to talk to that also is good for content?
So you're talking about players, right? Because I feel like it's a trick question if you don't say
players, staff, coaches. Yeah.
No, I would. Man, who would be a good co-host?
You lost your boy Michael Pierce. We've had Michael Pierce on the show when you fill in for Ron Johnson.
Yeah, he would be fun.
Michael Pierce is good. One guy that always asks, and he actually brought it up to me the other day, just in walking. He was like, "Man, like me and you would make a really good podcast." Dalvin Tomlinson, who was Michael Pierce's best friend last week. Last year.
Cool.
Dalvin Tomlinson is such a unique person. Like, he has so many interests outside of life, and he has a really big personality. Like, I really like being around Dalvin Tomlinson. Outside of him, this interview hasn't came out yet. It'll come out later this week, but Za'Darius Smith, like the guy's character, his personality, his energy. You're going to see it in the interview that comes out later this week. Like, he is a guy that when he's on, and that's what you need for our world, right? You got to be entertaining. You got to let the fans in. You got to be a little bit vulnerable too. So he has a balance of everything, and I feel like if it's not Dalvin Tomlinson, Za'Darius Smith, I feel like we'll bounce off of each other really well. So we'll see. Hopefully those guys can make more plays when they defensive side of the ball, and they'll have me on as a guest host 10 to 15 years from now.
Gabe, 2 questions. One, I feel like you trimmed down the beard the last time I saw you actually in camp, so I want to see if that. Okay, it sounds like that's the case. Good, looks good, man. 2, yeah, I think there's a lot of areas on this team where we've been pleasantly surprised at the amount of depth they've been able to generate. I think safety obviously is one of them. Defensive line is another one. I think the Vikings are pretty happy with the offensive line depth. I'm a little bit, concerned about it, but I think that the Vikings seem pretty positive about it. But one area that has been put into sharp relief in terms of that is tight end, right? Without Irv Smith, they're expecting him back by week 1. Sounds like he's on track, but without Irv Smith, we've seen a lot of Johnny Munt, Zach Davidson, Ben Ellison. We saw a little bit of Sean Byer in camp. What is the plan, do you think, in, as Irv Smith continues to be somewhat of an injury concern, overblown, I think, from my perspective, but something that's in everybody's mind. What do you think is the plan in a world where he has to miss, 10, 20 snaps or even, a couple of games here and there, when it comes to getting a guy to step up and play a tight end role, even if it's not, maybe a tight end in the tight end room?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, if Irv Smith Jr. is out, Johnny Munt's going to be the guy. They're trying to develop Nick Muse. I know Nick Muse is a 7th round pick, but if you look at the film last week, like he has been putting up some numbers. Like, he's been doing his thing both in the blocking game and the pass catching game. There was a play last week where he chipped the defensive end, knocked him on his butt, and then went out for a route and caught like an 8-yard pass. So there's an option there. And then Zach Davidson, I feel like he has the most upside. He just has to be a little bit more consistent. Like I kind of empathize with Zach Wilson right now, right? Because when I was in college, my sophomore year playing at Liberty, everybody was talking about me. All right, this guy's going to be the next slot receiver. He has so much potential. He can do this. He can do that. And I was so caught up in that moment that I was dropping easy passes. And it took me some time to develop to say, like, okay, let's flesh out all that noise. Let's just make some catches, go out there, just have some fun, and then ultimately get the opportunities that I deserve. But until that time comes, I gotta put the pressure, or not even the pressure, but the opportunity kind of goes to CJ Hamm. He's such a do-it-all type of fullback. You can line him up at tight end, and it's somewhat of a mismatch. He can block. He's fast. He can run. He can block. He can pretty much do everything you need him to. And I think right now with Irv Smith Jr. out, Johnny Munt and CJ Hamm, I feel like both of those guys are going to be getting a majority of those tight end / fullback reps. I mean, you definitely have to make a defense off balance, and both of those guys can do that. You don't want to put that nickel on the field or that smaller DB that can cover a fullback or cover a tight end and kind of put you at a disadvantage if you're an offensive coordinator. So you want to put that advantage back on yourselves. And I think CJ Hamm and Johnny Munt will be those guys. I mean, think about the Rams offense last year when Tyler Higbee got hurt. I mean, they were going further down the roster and they still won a Super Bowl. So it's going to force this offensive, coaching staff to be more creative. But I still think the guys are still on this roster to do so.
Gabe, I'm glad you brought up your career at Liberty. Tell me, who is the team CCU that you might have played at Liberty? Just fill in the blank for me. Coastal Carolina? Who are we talking about?
Yeah, Coastal Carolina University.
Coastal Carolina.
That was our rival.
Yep. Well, clearly, because on October 19th, 2013, you lost to them 55-52. Gabe Henderson had 9 receptions, 135 yards, and a touchdown. Tell me about that game.
Man, you got to bring that up, Sam, huh? Like, come on, man.
You beat them the next year. 15-14, and you had 10 catches for 114. So clearly They were having nightmares about Gabe Henderson, the slot guy. But I want to know about the 55-52 game. Tell me about that.
Man, that was probably one of the craziest games in my career. So Coastal is like, the Carolina Duke game for us. So like our stadium sat like 22,000 and I think we had like 26. So like everything was just crazy that game. Leading up to the game, I can tell their game plan was stop our number one receiver. His name was Darren Peterson. So I was just that aggravating pest in the middle, just catching passes, going up the field. Like I think out of those 155 yards, I probably had 130 in the first half. So after the first half, they started double teaming me. So that was the game plan. So I want to say we were up probably 20 points going into the fourth quarter. All our fans started leaving. So like everybody's like, all right, let's get ready for Bible. I was about to say let's get ready to party, but they're like, let's get ready for Bible class and get ready for Old Testament studies, New Testament studies, and go from there. So everybody was leaving. So it was probably 15,000 by the time the 10-minute mark came in the fourth quarter. They started coming back. I was getting double teamed, and ultimately went to overtime, and we lost. So that game, there was a picture of me like on one knee, and the photographer's behind me, and I'm on one knee looking at the Coastal Carolina celebration. They're just like going crazy, and I hung that up in my dorm room after that game and used that as motivation. For the following season. And granted, I had a pretty good game. They were the number one team in the country when we beat them undefeated. We made the playoffs and made history that year, my senior year. So that was a lot of fun, but you had to bring that up, didn't you?
Well, you were the only team to beat them the next year. Looks like a last-second field goal, maybe 15-14, and you had a huge game. So there's a good story there, Gabe. That win doesn't mean as much if you don't lose the year before. There's catharsis. It all evens out in the end. So it ended well for you.
Yeah, indeed. And that's still, I always like brag about it, but like my senior year when we beat Coastal, that was still the best year in school history. Like we've had Malik Willis come out. We've had Antonio Gandy Golden. We've had some pretty good athletes get drafted in the first 3 to 4 rounds, but they can't take that playoff win and beating the number one team in the country away from us.
You must have been stumping pretty hard for Malik Willis. I mean, don't lie to me. You were in Kwesi's ear about it.
I wasn't in his ear, but I talked to a few people. I wore some Liberty. Like, this is a true story. Like, during draft period, like, I wore some Liberty apparel. Like, a Liberty.
I respect it.
It was a good conversation.
That is
starter.
amazing.
Good conversation starter.
Subliminal
Yeah.
messaging going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like leaving
Yeah.
post-it notes, like, oh, sorry, that's my post-it note.
Malik Willis, no matter
oh,
what.
interesting.
Yeah. I love it. Oh.
Yeah.
Gabe,
so
I know you got to
of course,
go.
they didn't bite the bullet. So go ahead. My bad.
I know. Yeah, no, that's an area of angst for me. I wanted him to, but he's at Gabe A. Henderson on Twitter, Vikings Entertainment Network, Vikings.com. Look for that big interview coming out later this week that he mentioned. Gabe, thanks for joining us, man. We'll talk to you again soon, all right?
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
You bet.
Yeah, take care, Gabe.
And you can catch Gabe filling in for Ron Johnson on the Ron Johnson Show as well. Love Gabe, love his contributions, and revisiting his career. And to be honest with you, I didn't know the stats on Gabe until I looked him up during the interview. He's got some stats. I mean, he had 100-yard games in college. That's pretty amazing.
Hey, in your PPR league, man, just a machine there, Sam. I didn't know those stats either, man. Yeah, absolutely.
A regular Wes
What a
Welker,
stud.
right? He could have hit 100%.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone call Tom
We're going to
Brady.
argue about CJ Hamm's fate in a moment, but first we have our 4-minute drill. We each get 1 minute to make a point. Arif Hasan goes into debate mode. We've got a clock on the screen, and we have a graphic to play to introduce the segment. Let's run it. I want everybody to give me Kirk Cousins' 2022 stat line. So that would be yards, touchdowns, and interceptions. We'll keep it basic. Bonus points for completion percentage. But we'll start with Luke Inman. Kirk Cousins, 2022. You've got 1 minute to convince us of his stats for the year. Let's go.
4,800 yards, 45 touchdowns are on the table for Kirky this year. Same system we saw Matt Stafford throw for 4,900 last year. And Kirk has better weapons, I think, top to bottom, all the way around, not just in the passing game, but the running game, I think, is going to give him a lot more freedom in the passing lanes than Stafford had in LA. Kirk was tied to such a conservative system under Zimmer, didn't really let him be more aggressive, even if that means turning the ball over and throwing more interceptions. I think those will rise just by default as well. I think he'll throw the most interceptions he's ever thrown in his career. Currently, that sits at 13. He's thrown that twice in 2 seasons in his career. I think about 15 to 18 interceptions is what I'd expect. He's still always been good, though, at not turning the ball over when passing. Stafford had 17 picks last season. Bottom line, though, 4,800 yards, 45 TDs, 16 interceptions. That's what I've got him going for in 2022. Oh, and 1 rushing touchdown as well, Sam. Throw that in there.
And a bad gritty afterward. 45
bad
touchdowns,
gritty.
though.
Yep.
Arif, let's go.
All right, I'm not going to go quite that aggressive. Luke's always been kind of a bit of the optimist, but I'm going to say we're going to get above 4,500 yards. I think that makes sense given that we should expect a 550 attempt passing offense, maybe a little bit more. The Vikings did have a lot of close games last year, so I don't want to project too much more in terms of passing volume, but in terms of passing frequency over average, I think so. The Vikings will be ahead in a couple more games than they were last year. That's going to be made up for by the style of offense that they're in. So we're going to see about 8.1 to 8.3 yards per attempt. That's just kind of the area that Kirk seems to excel at. I think we're going to see above a 5% touchdown rate. I think we're going to get maybe a career high in touchdowns for him. That's going to be about 38. I don't know that we're going to be able to cut down on interceptions a ton, but it's not going to be bad. I think we're going to be at 10 interceptions. So with that in mind, probably a 67% completion percentage. I think we're going to see what amounts to a career year for Kirk. Given that, we've got 17 games, it is possible we hit something like 4,800, but I think 4,500 with the 38 touchdown, 10 interception ratio is going to be something that propels them into a Pro Bowl conversation should they be able to threaten the playoffs.
Backed by data, Arif Hasan, very on brand. Luke Braun, let's hear it.
Yeah, when we talk about a quarterback's stat line, I feel like too often we hear like a proxy for how good that. No, we're chasing volume here. If you're talking like a fantasy football perspective, we're talking about how often are they going to pass? How many attempts are we going to see? And a little bit, how good is this quarterback? But when it comes to touchdowns and interceptions, it's a totally different thing. I'm going to go with like a 4,350 with there'll be ahead sometimes. There might be some games where he's not throwing as much, but there will be a lot more passing volume, I think. If you remember, Kevin O'Connell got into a whole thing in Washington wanting to use pass plays to set up other pass plays, and Bill Callahan didn't agree. And I think he gets to do it his way now. I think you're going to see a lot more passing. So I'll go like 43-50. I think he will be able to throw like 36 touchdowns, and maybe a little bit of a riskier style might lead to some more interceptions. We'll go with like 12 interceptions. And I think we can be okay with it because we want Kirk to be more aggressive.
Yeah, good arguments all around. I'll take my stab at this year. I look at Kirk Cousins' track record now going into year 8 as a starter. And what is Kirk if not consistently inconsistent, inconsistently consistent, whichever way you want to phrase it. He finds a way to do the same thing every year. And he gets there in convoluted ways, but he always ends up with around 4,000 and change, 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. That's like his per 17 average as a quarterback. And he's got a gigantic track record at this point. And not every offense has been run first. Some of these have been a little more pass forward, and he still finds a way to put up similar statistics. So I think the law of averages and the law of Kirk comes into play here, and he'll find his way to about that 4,500 number, which was tossed out and I think is pretty much correct. I'm going to go 29 touchdowns, just shy of 30, and 8 interceptions, because I don't think he can convince his body to be more risk-taking. I think he will find a way to avoid those plays, and that's to his credit and to his detriment. But I just
the arm just pulls back.
I can't convince myself that he's suddenly going to just let her rip. I think that he'll find a way, even if he has a fast start. I think he'll still have those Kirk Cousins stretches where he kind of disappears. So none of those prognostications, though, gentlemen, are bad for the Vikings. I mean, all of those guesses, even my conservative guess, still pretty good for Minnesota if he ends up with that, assuming that the decision-making is good. They're choosing the correct times to pass and the correct times to run. And speaking of the run game, I want to pose this question because I saw a stat from Eric Eager. The Vikings have run 21 personnel, exactly 3 plays in the preseason. Three plays with 2 running backs on the field, a.k.a. a fullback. So, Arif, is C.J. Hamm becoming a wasted roster spot?
I'm glad you asked it like that and not whether or not C.J. Hamm is at risk of losing his job, because the way they've talked him up off season, no way would they cut him. Just to save face, even. Like, it would be so ridiculous for them to cut him and then for us to go into the facility. It's like, hey, you said all these great things about C.J. Hamm and then you cut him. That's kind of screwed up, isn't it? No, he's definitely going to be on the roster. Is he a wasted roster spot? I don't think necessarily that's the case. And the reason for that is because I think the things that they want to do with C.J. Hamm are the kinds of things that they don't want to reveal in the preseason. I think that they want to deploy C.J. Hamm in ways that are strategic to them because they think that he could do everything. They think that he could be a Kyle Juszczyk, right? And if he could be a Kyle Juszczyk, you do not, reveal your hand early in the preseason. Now, remember, the Vikings starters have rested, a lot. They've played like 9 total snaps in the preseason so far. They consider C.J. Hamm to be a starter, right? And if that's the case, then no, you're not going to get a bunch of 21 personnel. What are we going to learn by putting Jake Bargas? Well, I guess Jake Bargas isn't even on the team, right? Like, what are you gonna learn by putting a fullback on the field, right? So I think that the way that you think of a fullback and the way the Vikings want to think about C.J. Hamm, those are completely different things. And I think that they want to be creative, have him run wheel routes, have him run choice routes, have him motion in and out, have him play wing, have him play, right up in the nub. Like, there's so many different ways that you could use somebody that they project C.J. Hamm to be. I don't know if they're right. I think that they're being really optimistic, but so many ways that they project you can use C.J. Hamm that I think that the preseason deployment doesn't tell us much.
When you decide whether or not you're going to use a fullback, you're not doing that before you know who the fullback is. Like, that's not a decision. You're like, I'm going to be a fullback offense this year. Who are our... No, if you have a fullback, be a fullback team. If you don't have a fullback, don't be a fullback team. And the difference between... this is probably the key difference between like the McVay version and the Shanahan version is that Shanahan has Juszczyk and uses him. And there are Shanahan concepts that have kind of leaked into this. This is not just a copy-paste McVay playbook. There are San Francisco concepts in this playbook that we've seen already. They've spent entire days drilling like lead concepts with a fullback in them in camp. So no, I'm with Arif. I think that there's going to be more of this in the season, but even without that, even without lead concepts where you have CJ Hamm as a lead blocker, the real difference between like a run play where you have a lead fullback and a run play without one is that a tight end does that job anyways. CJ Hamm might be the second best tight end on the roster right now. Like there's
You're not wrong.
That tight end depth is such a problem that putting the full back in is like genuinely maybe we should do this if Irv Smith isn't healthy. Maybe CJ Hamm gets tight end reps. Yeah, that guy should probably be on your 53 and available to you. So I wouldn't call it a wasted roster spot. I think they're going to use him more than we think. Probably wouldn't go with preseason starter snap counts by this logic. So Justin Jefferson's a wasted roster spot too.
Yeah, Inman. Let me tee you up in a second here, Luke, because I think that they're both right. Things that were told to me prior to training camp were that Kevin O'Connell actually believes the LA Rams used 11 too much. They were number 1 in 11 personnel usage last year. He actually thinks there are mismatches to be exposed if they go a little heavier. Now, I know the roster construction with the lack of tight end depth doesn't really lend itself to that, except for CJ Hamm, who can play a little bit of that tight end role. I think you guys really hit the nail on the head. And based on what we know about the team's paranoia and their desire not to play anyone in the preseason, they're clearly trying to 4D chess this thing to unveil the Hamm package against the Packers in week 1. So, Luke, Inman, what I would pose to you is, let's assume that we're right. Let's assume that CJ Hamm is a big part of this offense. Is the team right in doing that when that probably means they're taking KJ Osborne or another receiver off the field?
Well, it's a good question. I think when you can have such a stark contrast in your offense to spread out a defense on one play with 4 or 5 wide and come back the next play on 2nd and 2 with a heavy personnel fullback, it just really tests and stretches out a defensive capabilities, communication skills, things like that. So I absolutely don't think he's a wasted spot. I'm with both you guys, and I expect him to be on the field and make an impact. I think more than people think, given the opportunity or the opponent they're playing, week-to-week game plans, what KOC draws up in that offensive room. And like Arif mentioned, I don't think they've shown any of that in the preseason thus far on purpose. But even at training camp practice, maybe not in the preseason games, but at training camp practice, for me, the 1 or 2 days that I was out there, I saw Hamm out there quite a bit. I was actually a little surprised just because I had heard so little about him. So I certainly think that KOC wants to run the ball pretty effectively. And I'm glad Arif mentioned Kyle Juszczyk. Not just use him as a lead blocker, but utilize his pass catching skills as well. Probably not at tight end like we joked about, even though, let's be serious, maybe he would be a good tight end given our lack of depth right now. But in different roles, the wheel routes, things like that, I think would be a great way to maximize CJ Hamm's skill set for sure.
Nerdy stat of the day coming up around the corner, but first a reminder to subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota wherever you get your podcasts. And if you do that, you get access to a whole bunch of shows, a great array of sports talk here locally. Superior Sports Talk with Luke Inman and Reggie Wilson, The Ron Johnson Show with Ron Johnson and yours truly, this program right here, Minnesota Football Party, and our postcasts, instant reaction after Twins, Vikings, Wolves, and Wild games. Get it all on Locked On Sports Minnesota. That's on YouTube and free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Time for a new segment, gentlemen. Who would self-classify themselves as a nerd? Full hand up, kind of maybe. I've definitely got a hand up here.
No, I don't think anyone on this podcast is a nerd.
No one else is playing along. Okay.
Absolutely
Well,
not. No.
I think we've all got an awareness of the association between analytics and nerddom, and I'd like to lean into that a little bit. It's time for our nerdy stats of the day. I've instructed our panel to find the nerdiest stat they can possibly find. And Luke Braun, this is not saying that you're the number one nerd, but I want you to go first.
All right, I'm going to go with one that influenced the events of this morning. 3.11. That's the average time to throw for Kellen Mond in the pocket in this preseason in these 2 games. Him holding the ball that isn't always a sign that somebody's holding the ball too long. Sometimes there's a bunch of rollouts. You hold the ball longer on those. And how long you're supposed to hold the ball is different from play to play. So the average doesn't tell you everything. But in this particular case, yep, it's telling you what it should be, because he holds the ball too long. He hesitates. He reads it too long. He takes too long to get to his check down. He takes too long to get through his progressions. He takes too long to make any decision. And even once he's made a decision, he takes too long to throw it. It's led to sacks. It's led to interceptions. It's led to pressure that probably shouldn't have happened. It was a huge problem. And I think it's one of the things that makes him an untenable backup quarterback. And that's the one I came prepared with. And I guess the Vikings agree.
That is so perfect for a nerdy stat of the day. I'm so grateful that you came up with that. Arif.
It's actually going to be pretty related to what Luke just came up with. It's the pressure to sack rate. So this actually, I think if you don't read it correctly, is a statistic that would come across in Mon's favor, right? Because what pressure to sack rate tells us is how often a quarterback's pressures result in a quarterback sacks, and very often that tends to translate into a responsibility for the quarterback for the ability to avoid sacks once they invite pressure. Now, Kellen Mond's pressure to sack rate is extremely low, right? It's 7.2%. Compare that to Nick Mullens, and that's just in the preseason. Compare that to Nick Mullens, which is at 18.2%, which is about NFL average. But I want to say that this is kind of a warning to Vikings fans, right? Because you take a look at quarterbacks with below a 10% pressure to sack rate over the past couple of years, they have all come back down to earth. What happens here is that they invite sacks. They don't receive the sacks in that very limited sample size, and people don't realize what is actually at risk here. Because if you hold on to the ball for 3.11 seconds in the pocket, you're going to get sacked. And the fact that Kellen Mond has avoided sacks, yeah, some of that is skill on him, but some of that is a lot of luck and variance. I think that we would be talking a lot more about Kellen Mond's inability to get out of pressure, or his likelihood of inviting pressure, if he had actually generated the number of sacks he should have based on the number of pressures, which is to say that once the regular season starts and he gets forced into a game, if he gets forced into a game, we're going to see a ton of sacks from him that we didn't anticipate or see from the preseason. I think that is a warning sign that things are actually a lot worse than they seem to be, because that's going to be it's one of those snapback stats. It's one of those things that rubber bands back to kind of hitting you in the face. It happened to Case Keenum in the playoffs. It's something I remember warning people about, that his pressure to sack ratio was unsustainable.
Yeah, I feel like for his alleged athleticism, he doesn't wriggle out of trouble quite like you would want him to. Luke Inman, you're by far the coolest person on this podcast, so we'll save you for last in Nerdy Stat of the Day.
You're on the shade.
I've got
Why
a good
would you do that? Why would you do
T.Y. McGill nugget. T.Y. McGill's played for a zillion billion teams. We addressed that with Will Raggets last week. When he has been given over 100 snaps in 3 separate seasons, he has a PFF grade of 69 or better all 3 of those seasons. And for those that don't know, it is nice. That's a good grade. That is like green, which is better than yellow, which is better than red. He is in like the serviceable starter category as a pass rusher. I should clarify that. That's pass rush grade, not overall grade, pass rush grade. So it shouldn't be surprising then that T.Y. McGill is showing pass rush chops with the Minnesota Vikings, because when he's been given a chance, he has been pretty good. Luke Inman.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, I knew there was no way I would keep up with my 2 counterpoints. No offense, Sam. You did great as well. But Luke and Arif, this is their bread and butter. Let's be honest. Come on. But there was 2 stats that stuck out this summer. Again, not on that level. No next-gen stats, no PFF, that have stuck with me through this offseason, this new era under KOC. First of all, Vikings ranked 3rd in league in DVOA passing in the red zone, but only 29th when running in the red zone. Thought that was interesting. But the other thing is we try to draw so many similarities back to the Rams and what KOC is bringing with him here to Minnesota. Now, it was only 13% of their plays, but the Rams had the worst offense in the league when opponents had base defense personnel on the field at minus 42% DVOA, 3.6 yards per play. So we just talked about CJ Hamm. All right, how much are they going to utilize CJ Hamm? Well, when CJ's on the field, you assume you get a lot of base defense personnel. Just going to be interesting to see if KOC starts to shed that a little bit and learn from his mistakes, and knowing how much they struggled, again, when defenses were in that base personnel. And maybe, again, how much he utilizes this fullback CJ Hamm versus, again, just trying to stretch out the defense and keep them on their toes a little bit. I thought those two were pretty interesting.
Yeah. No, Luke, you sold yourself short. Those are excellent nerdy stats. Maybe you're more of a nerd than I thought. Maybe you're right with us
He's
here.
probably the biggest nerd on the show.
One of us.
Honest.
Yeah, let's be honest.
One of us.
One of us.
Check out care11.com/lockedon for links to every single show. Remember, it's Endless Vikings Talk with local experts. Subscribe and leave a comment or 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. We got one more short topic, and then we'll get into our party fouls. Vikings position group rankings. Obviously, the quarterback position group has already changed today, but other position groups ranked as well at ESPN Insider. If you pay for that, you can get access, but the Vikings ranked as a position group 5th at wide receiver, 3rd at running back. For those that didn't read the story or didn't have access, would you like to guess which teams were above them at wide receiver and running back?
At running back, it's got to be the Colts and the Browns, I would guess.
Yeah.
Maybe the Packers are in there as well. Those got to be the top 4 teams, though.
You got it right away. Colts and Browns. So for Browns, that would be, I guess, Dearness Johnson, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb. Indianapolis, who do they have beyond? They have Hines and Taylor, top 2.
Yeah, and they just lost Marlon Mack, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
It was quite
all right.
room.
At wide receiver, who would you guess are above the Vikings?
Ooh,
Man,
that's a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I wonder. So I think the Bengals are up there. I wonder if they're already incorporating Pickens into the Steelers. I'm guessing not, because these articles tend to be written by Barnwell or Mike Clay, and they're very statistically oriented. So probably the Buccaneers along with the Bengals.
I think some AFC West teams. Maybe it's the Broncos or Chargers.
I mean, the Dolphins just got a bunch of guys, right? So you could say along with Waddle and Hill, but I wouldn't put the Dolphins above the Vikings. But that's something. Oh, the Cardinals, of course, right? Because they got DeAndre Hopkins. I could absolutely see the Cardinals up there. But to me, the Bengals and the Buccaneers are the clear 1-2. After that, it's tough for me. I feel like Minnesota should be up there. Maybe I'm overrating Osborne relative to what these eggheads tend to do. But I guess I could see Miami because of Waddle's upside. I guess I could see the Chargers. Maybe Seattle would make a ton of sense to me as well. But yeah, that one's tough. I would just put.
Yeah, how about the Eagles? AJ Brown, a great 1-2 punch. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Maybe they're up there. But again, I go back to the AFC West. There's got to be at least one of those AFC West teams in there.
I could certainly see the Eagles. If it was a Mike Clay or Bill Barnwell article, I could see them downgrading AJ Brown more than you or I would.
Yeah.
All right. So all 4 teams above them have been mentioned. It was a Mike Clay article, for the record.
I throw out like 10 teams, so of course.
Yeah.
Keep throwing those darts up, man. Throw those darts up.
Bengals number 1.
Spielman did.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Tampa number 2.
Nice.
There's
Miami
1 2 there.
Miami number
3.
Miami 3.
Yeah. Who's on that Miami roster? So it's
Tua's gonna go out, baby.
Jalen Waddle, Cedric Wilson. That was it. I knew they had added another guy. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a good move.
There's no way that just Waddle and Hill, I think, would get them to be number 3. And then number 4,
I like Wilson a lot.
It's Arizona, and like with or without the Hopkins suspension, obviously with it, I mean, that's a huge detractor for them. But what else are they hanging their hat on? Like Rondale Moore taking a gigantic step?
Rondale Moore,
Marquise Brown,
and Marquise Brown, they just traded for him.
Yeah, Marquise Brown has got over 100 passes 2 years in a row, I think, or at least targets have been insane in that Baltimore offense.
I think their depth is pretty bad outside of those 3, which is why I kind of moved off of that. But
yeah, what do you look at?
They've
Andy
taken
Isabella?
A lot of swings and misses at wide receiver. I mean, Andy Isabella is kind of the last remnant of those swings and misses. I know they've cut.
Johnson?
Oh yeah.
I remember
Hakeem 6th, 7th round pick. Yeah.
Butler.
Hakeem Butler. Yeah.
Hakeem Butler was the big one. Yes, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, they drafted 3 receivers that year, and all of them were steals. None of them knocked out.
Right. How far we've
I think
come.
Rondale Moore is sneaky good, but otherwise, I'm not
Rondale
thrilled
Moore is
with
good.
it.
No,
I think
Moore's
that's
great.
a big part of it. Marquise Brown,
It's
and then
the two of
obviously
them
depends
pair
on-
very well together.
Yeah, and they use Zach
complement
Ertz, and now they have Trey
Yeah,
McBride
underneath
was
up top,
the
yeah.
number one tight end coming into this draft as well. So as far as a passing game as a
I
whole, yeah, they
don't.
got a lot
I
of weapons.
personally wouldn't put this group without DeAndre Hopkins. I wouldn't put this group ahead of the Vikings. Obviously, I think with DeAndre Hopkins, I still probably put the Vikings ahead of them. But I can see kind of what the argument is. But I would put the Vikings above them. So no Chargers.
Range of outcome on the Cardinals is crazy this year.
Yeah.
I could believe like 6 to 12 wins.
What
Somewhere
do the
in
Chargers rank? Because they just got they still have Joshua Palmer, right? So they've got Allen, Palmer, and Williams.
there. Just tap dance with me for a moment. The Chargers are 6, right behind Minnesota.
Oh, they're right behind the Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Seattle, who you mentioned, is 7. So you did a nice job there. 32.
How about the Broncos? Where are the Broncos at? Jerry Jeudy,
Broncos.
KJ Hamler. I'm just curious.
14. And I like that. I like that core too. Baltimore.
How about the
32.
Raiders? How about the Raiders?
Raiders?
Devontae Adams,
10.
Renfro.
10.
Wow.
I think I saw somebody,
Interesting.
Kevin Ostreicher,
Wow.
who does Locked On Ravens. I couldn't tell if he was joking or not, but he might not have been joking that Isaiah Likely might be wide receiver 1 on the Ravens.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of hype.
So
yeah,
aggressive.
for sure. There's a lot of hype. Yeah, that's crazy
That's
though.
so aggressive.
That's crazy.
He
This
does
is just
Locked On
anti-gopher
Ravens.
bias.
Like he
That's
is
what it
being a
is.
homer about it. It's okay.
Okay.
No, this is
for
this
You
sure.
say
is
anti-gopher bias, Arif?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know what I'm
right.
talking
Yeah,
about.
of course.
Yeah. A common bias in
boat.
sports media. Gotta any way that you can dig on gophers like Rashad Bateman. People will always take those shots. It's famously.
I'm trying to think of other examples, but I'm just going to go with you on it.
Just trust me.
Look, man, how
Just
many
go with it.
Pro Bowls did Eric Decker get?
Not enough.
Is Adam
Should've
Weber
been
on the
more.
roster? No.
We had Adam Weber on the Ron Johnson
Great
show
name
last
drop.
week. Yeah. They played
Did
together
Tim
on the
Brewster
same team.
get run out of the league for no reason? Yeah, it's bogus, man.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, how many Pro Bowls did Lawrence Maroney make? None. That's because of the media bias against Gophers.
Fair enough.
Nothing to do with Bill Belichick and that Patriots.
Yeah, how many times have we heard Boy Maffe's name this preseason? Once? Brutal.
I don't know. He was blowing up that first game, but maybe
Right,
I was
and we
only
only heard-
seeing
and-
the mentions from the
and we
Gophers
didn't
Twitter
see-
account.
We didn't see as much mention of Boy Mafe as we should have, even though he had a wonderful preseason. This is a
I know
common
you're
bias.
lying about how much Seahawks Twitter is on your feed.
What is the gigantic tackle doing? Falele. What's he up to? I haven't seen his name.
Yeah, another
Bias is
example.
real.
Yeah.
How have I not seen his name? Like, I feel like he'd be the classic preseason player that everyone would be talking about. Is he hurt?
He's on the
Yeah,
Ravens.
O-line maybe just doesn't get talked about a ton. Ronnie Stanley, I think, on the pup, so he
drafted
should
him
be
in
starting
Lambeau.
with Morgan Moses, right?
How do I
if Ronnie
spell
Stanley's on the
Fa'alele?
pup.
How do you not know how to spell it?
F-A-A-L-E-L-E.
Okay.
Well, because
Just
they've
doing a
got
quick
Juwan
live
Jones,
research.
right? So that's probably why. That's probably why we're not seeing.
Yeah,
it, 'cause
that's
it's
true. Yeah,
Because I think Fa'alele is probably right tackle only.
right tackle only. Yeah, you're right.
That's my
I think
guess.
he's playing. All right, party fouls to end the show. Let's run the animation. I'll start, and I'll fall on the sword right away. Zach Davidson's game was a party foul for me. I mean, I went in with high hopes, great optimism, a full spirit, and I left, and my proverbial party cup, my red Solo cup, had been poured out. It was completely empty. I had nothing left. Zach Davidson's drop down the middle, which could have gone for an 80-yard touchdown with his 20.9 mile per hour top speed, as we learned. To lose out on that opportunity, major party foul, Zach. Catch the ball.
Yeah, can't go wrong with that one. Are we going to have to go back to KJ Osborne as the punt returner? I mean, that says something that I'm even bringing this up because he wasn't great in his first 2 years in the NFL, but at least he never fumbled last year. And that's where we're at now. That's the bar now. He had 50 punt returns in college, so he's got some experience somewhere in there, albeit more at the collegiate level. But And I know they don't want KJ Osborne to, be back there now that he's going to be an integral part of this passing game. But I just don't know how you line up ISM back there at this point from what we've seen and how much he struggled to hold on to the football.
Yeah, and just let him be a receiver, honestly, at this point.
But who's the option? But okay, I agree with you. But now what? Who are you throwing up?
I think either Jalen Naylor or KJ Osborne, and I think you can trust KJ Osborne to be a better player at that position than he was 2 years ago when he was actually a liability, because he's a better receiver than he was 2 years ago. And I wouldn't be shocked if, kind of there's a confounding variable between the two of them that kind of would explain improvement of both. Like you said, he had 4 punt returns last year. None of them were disasters. I think that that's the competition now. It's Jalen Naylor and KJ Osborne. Tough competition because you're not going to play Osborne all that much in the preseason. But I think that that's what you go with. So, yeah.
No, I'm with you. I agree. I'm with you.
If Tommy Hennigan was healthy, we'd be hearing more about him.
Right. Would we?
Would we?
I got to go with Kellen Mond in the final interception. I'm going with a specific Kellen Mond play for my party foul. The last interception he threw baffled me. And I actually went and asked forums with coaches in them, please explain what he saw to me. And the most charitable thing that people could say is that he should have looked off the safety and forgot to. But there is no excuse for that interception. He throws a horribly underthrown ball. He doesn't step into it, even though he could have, and just didn't see the safety. This safety was not disguised. This was not a hidden safety. There was no deception at all. This was just a single high, deep safety right there, threatening everything deep, and he just threw it right at him anyways. I can't fathom what he thought he saw, and the most charitable thing I can think of is that he forgot to look.
Yeah, it's almost like he lost a bet with that guy or something. Like, dude, you owe me one. Because that was just what are we doing? You're right, man. That was insane. Either look him off or rifle that in there. Don't baby it and try to put some touch on there and do the flick of the wrist. That was bad. That was bad.
And he's thrown a couple YOLO balls downfield in training camp and in games, unfortunately.
Dude, they've always been in double coverage. They've all the thing is,
Floaters.
When he has had a deep
Dead
receiver
ducks.
Open in single coverage, he has never thrown it. The amount of yards that Amir Smith has had left on the field by Kellen Mond in training camp is baffling. Not to mention Myron Mitchell and Tristan Jackson. But when they're double covered, he is all about it. It's crazy. All right.
He actually yells YOLO when he throws it.
Yeah, right. My party foul is Shannon Sullivan. Stop name searching, my dude. Just prove me wrong by playing good football. This is ridiculous, right?
For the podcast audience, we should read this out loud. What camp you been watching, Arif? I got time today.
Entitled
In
case.
Arif's original tweet, Shannon Sullivan might be the biggest issue for the defense this year, based on what we've been seeing throughout camp, and now that play, giving up 20 yards. Why the hate, Arif?
Thing that occurred on the field, and he was like, "I know what you're talking about." So you just gave him 20 yards in that tweet. What? That's what I'm watching. So that's party foul 1. Party foul 2 is the way the Panthers have been treating this quarterback thing. They're being insulated by the fact that Matt Corral had a ligament injury that he suffered in the preseason, but Corral should have started that game. I love PJ Walker. Props to PJ Walker. He should be starting for the team. But if it's a starting battle between Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, and by all accounts, Baker Mayfield was ahead the entire time, dude, give Matt Corral the reps that he needs in order to develop. Otherwise, you're going to have a third-round pick on your practice squad at quarterback. Just ridiculous that they wouldn't give him any time. And, of course, now we're not going to talk about it because Matt Corral got injured, probably a season-ending injury, a torn ligament in his foot during the preseason. But he shouldn't have been in that specific position because he should have been playing earlier in the game. So just a ridiculous way to handle this quarterback thing from the Panthers.
Should be noted, while we were recording, they officially named Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. That was just obvious.
Yeah.
That was a good show, gentlemen. Gabe Henderson joined, covered a lot of ground. Make sure to check us out, Locked On Sports Minnesota, wherever you get your podcasts, free and available, or on YouTube. For Luke Inman, Luke Braun, and Arif Hasan. We will return on Thursday, where Ron Johnson makes his weekly appearance, and we will preview the Broncos game on Saturday, and maybe get a little Andrew Booth update and a Nick Mullens press conference under our belt. I'm Sam Ekstrom. Thanks so much for watching the Minnesota Football Party. Have a great Monday.